Salvador is Bitcoin country, and it's the epicenter of also something that was kicked off not just in El Salvador, but in other places. Like a lot of people came to adopting Bitcoin to El Salvador to see how Bitcoin Beach did it, to start this, right? President Nayib Bukele was inspired by Bitcoin Beach and their work that they did for many years. And he saw that, barely literate Salvadorans can use Bitcoin and it works for them. Then it can also work for the other 7 million if those people can do it, and a lot of people are moving to El Salvador now because it's this beacon for freedom and sovereignty and Bitcoin, but also a lot of people want to replicate what is happening in El Salvador and in Bitcoin Beach in their own communities. So they're coming from all over the world to El Salvador every year to exchange, to see, to feel, to update themselves on how to do this, which technologies to use, which educational approaches to use, which materials there are, and what works and what not.
Hello guys, welcome once again to Bitcoiner podcast. So adopting Bitcoin is coming. It's really close, it's really soon. So I hope all of you are buying your tickets to fly to El Salvador and to taste our wonderful coffee, to visit our beaches or visit our mountains, try pupusas. So the main topic today will be all about El Salvador and all about adopting Bitcoin. So today we have a special guest, and it's Kemal, and he's organizing Adopting Bitcoin with this wonderful team that you will meet in El Salvador. So welcome to Bitcoiner.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Juan. Pleasure to be here.
So Kemal, you're not in El Salvador, but you're organizing Adopting Bitcoin. I want to know all about that, but before that, I would like that the audience know a bit about you. So if you can share a bit about your background, where are you from, and we will discuss your rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Kemal. I'm 42 years old. I'm a father of 2 children and married. I live in Istanbul in Turkey. I moved here 4 years ago during the pandemic. And before that, I lived in Germany, in south of Germany, in Munich. And that's basically where I found Bitcoin, learned about it, connected with the local Bitcoin community, and started to really dive into it. My background is I studied political science and law. I've been working in digital advertising and marketing for probably 25 years or so. Was very early on involved in various community-based digital projects, things like Facebook, but way before Facebook. And always been interested in computers and networking and internet. And heard about Bitcoin very early on. But discarded it like many people do at the first glance. And then in 2015, 2016, I discovered it again. And then I connected with the local Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin Munich meetup, which is one of the oldest, or maybe the oldest continuously running Bitcoin meetup in the world. They've been going on since 2010. Very knowledgeable Bitcoiners there have been like meeting once a month, talking about Bitcoin. So I came in right at the block size wars, tried to wrap my head around it. What does it mean? And, was very excited about the Lightning Network at that time. And, set up my node, on a Raspberry Pi at that time, and, was trying to check out if Lightning actually works. And then, I made it work. Obviously it was very clunky. It took me like multiple months to set it up at that time. But in the end, I managed to send payments, and I think that was also around the time when Jeff from Fulmo was doing the Lightning Hack Days, and they were in Munich. Also, a lot of developers from all over the place came to Munich for these hack days. And, I got a glimpse I got to meet the developers and presentations and panels and people hacking on Lightning. And it was really great to see and to meet with the people. And it was very inspiring. And it also gave me conviction in Bitcoin to see how developers are thinking around challenges, shortcomings, how they're addressing them, how transparent they are about shortcomings, right? I mean, at that time, there was also a lot of altcoins being pumped as the next Bitcoin because they were saying Bitcoin is slow and it doesn't scale and you can't make payments and stuff. And you would never hear any criticism or transparency about the shortcomings of these other blockchains or tokens as I saw it with the Bitcoiners, right? Like Bitcoiners obviously are they really want to make it work. And for that, you need an adversarial mindset. You need to be very transparent and honest about the shortcomings. So everything, all the problems, all the things that don't work, that are not ideal, can be addressed. And all these altcoin people, they didn't do that because it would hurt their token price, right? So I always found that very suspicious, that there is no honest discussions about shortcomings of things. But in Bitcoin, I found that plenty of, and it resonated with me a lot. And from there on, I set up my BTC Pay server, and I really wanted to see Bitcoin in action in the real world. And I onboarded a little cafe of a friend of mine to accept Bitcoin payments in Munich. So it was the first place that accepted Lightning payments in Munich. And it worked great. And it was really a changing moment because suddenly there was a real place in our city where people could go and pay with Bitcoin, and they didn't have to wait for 10 minutes or all that stuff. It was just really a slick payment experience and easy to set up. I'm not a technical person. I'm not a developer. I try to understand as much of the technology as possible just so I can explain it to others who are similar like me, non-developers. I think that's really important that more people understand how Bitcoin works. Me as a non-technical person being able to equip a place to accept Bitcoin and Lightning payments so early on, was a great boost for my conviction in this technology. And I think we've come a long way since then. Things have improved a lot. There's still a lot of criticism out there, but I have no doubt with the right attitude that the Bitcoin community has and the developers has, and the transparency and addressing these shortcomings and working on them, that there is nothing that cannot be resolved. It's always proven true ever since. Bitcoin is only improving every day, and the network effect is improving. Bitcoin is becoming more useful for more people. The more people use it, the more useful it becomes for every user. When El Salvador, a sovereign nation, decided to adopt Bitcoin, that was quite something. Nobody really expected it. I think it was a big surprise for everybody, me included. Hard to believe still that, but everything is kind of going a little bit faster than people think. It takes a lot of time, but then a lot of developments happen very quickly and sooner than people thought. So it's never a boring day in Bitcoin, and here we are now doing the fourth time adopting Bitcoin in El Salvador, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. I was taking notes about some things because if not, I'm gonna forget. because you're not a non-technical person, but you managed to install your own node and to do the BTC Pay server. So I want to ask you that. And but before that, you mentioned a lot of things regarding your Bitcoin rabbit hole journey. But what was the thing that made you click? You mentioned also that you have seen that there was this different perspective, right, with the shitcoins and Bitcoin. And I agree with you that actually I have seen those because I also when I started my Bitcoin rabbit hole journey, I also started with some altcoins and seeing all these conferences and yeah, it actually happened the same to me, that I was like, yeah, they want to, I mean, one of the main focus besides the token is like I have seen that they wanted to bring companies, big companies, to invest in future promises, because that's the thing that they have been developing, but you know, it's like they were starting, but they were all future promises and
opium.
And yeah, exactly, like myth. So, and with Bitcoin, no, I have seen that when there were pure Bitcoin conference and meetup, they never talk about the price. It's really odd that a person talk about the price, and if they do, I have seen that they probably are involved not just in Bitcoin, but with also other shitcoins or altcoins, yes. Right? So, but when you talk to a Bitcoiner, it's like never the price. It's all about the adoption or the technical part or miners or whatever, but it's never about the price. So, what made you click to get down to the Bitcoin rabbit hole?
Well, I think first of all, in the beginning when I found it, I had no idea about Bitcoin. I just used it because I wanted to make transactions. But then when I looked into it, like, what is it actually that Bitcoiners want Bitcoin to be? Like, why was it created? What is the aim of it? What is the goal of it? What is it trying to achieve? I sympathized a lot with it. So I had not a lot of background in economics. But I have now, spent a lot of hours thinking about what is money and stuff. I didn't have it at that time. I think the main thing that made it click for me, it was two things. All right. It's very ambitious goal that Bitcoin sets out to do. And, I think coming in at the block size wars helped me a lot, to understand how this very ambitious goal can be achieved. It can be achieved by really radical decentralization, having no single point of failure, a really anti-fragile network that cannot be shut down by people that don't like it, by people that are threatened by Bitcoin. So that was, I think, the first point. And seeing how fanatic Bitcoiners were about preserving the decentralization of the network in everything that they do. At that time, it was the ability to run a node on very low cost hardware. Like, it should be accessible to anybody, or almost anybody, almost everybody. So it doesn't cost a lot to run your own node, and by that, you have a lot of nodes out there, tens of thousands of Bitcoin nodes that are running over Tor. And if you want to shut down the Bitcoin network, you have to find and destroy each one of them. Because if you just miss one, then the whole network can be bootstrapped from the one that you didn't manage to catch, right? And so, that's just great. Like, and the way it is right now, you can run it on $100, $200 hardware. You can run it over Tor, and nobody can find that node. It's like as big as a cigarette box. And there are like tens of thousands of it out there. So once I understood that, I was like, okay, wow, this is going to stay. Like, nobody can shut it really down. There is many other reasons why it's very, very difficult to shut it down. It's not impossible, right? But it's so hard that we can say it's virtually impossible. And the second thing I think that clicked for me was being economically less literate at that time. Money for me was something you use as a medium of exchange. Also, my mother, when I explained Bitcoin to her, she would ask, okay, where can I pay with it? What can I buy with this? And it's a very common reaction that you get. And if you explain to somebody that Bitcoin is money, they will ask, okay, who will accept this? What can I buy with it? Right. There was this, also in the block size wars, the other side was saying that, Bitcoin blockchain doesn't scale. We need bigger blocks. So, commerce can use it. Merchants can use it for payments, which would be at the detriment to, the ability to run a node if you do it all on chain. And so the Lightning Network was a big question mark. It was very unclear at that time whether it would work. And for me, Bitcoin can't be just a pet rock that you, store and never transact with it. If it wants to fulfill its promise, if it wants to really outpace all the other competitor coins, like altcoins, then it really also needs to fulfill the function of a medium of exchange. It needs to be able to be used as money. If that prospect is not there, people will look for something else. So it was very, there was some uncertainty around that time, whether Lightning can actually fulfill that promise. And there were a lot of hope tied to Lightning. And now there is maybe even a little bit of a disillusionment because it's not very straightforward to do it with Lightning, and it's not enough to just have Lightning. We probably need further improvements, but it has brought us along the way to a good place, and it's becoming clear that the Lightning Network is here to stay. It's found its role, and Bitcoin can be used as money, even if you don't put every transaction for every coffee purchase onto the blockchain. This whole scaling in layers thing, I think is now understood by the technical community and also by the non-technical community. Question is around how do we manage to develop, this network in a way where not only can anybody run their node for small money, but, and not only can we have instant low fee payments, but also how can we do this in a way both low fee instant payments, decentralization, and on top of that, self-custody, right? Because obviously in El Salvador right now, we have a lot of Bitcoin banks like Chivo or Blink or Strike or Wallet of Satoshi, because, there are some requirements for being a self-sovereign Lightning user that make it difficult for non-technical people, or if you think about the inbound liquidity problem and things like that. And custodians like Bitcoin banks solve that problem with a trade-off of trust. It has brought us to a good spot in El Salvador, where, adoption is growing, more merchants are accepting it. And it's fairly easy even for non-technical and even illiterate people to use Bitcoin just by having an app on their phone and not worrying about anything else. So that's great. Further improvements are necessary, and there's a lively debate about which improvements should be brought to Bitcoin. So, even if you have little money, you can still be sovereign and self-custodial. So it's exciting times. There's lots of proposals out there.
Another thing that I wanted to ask is that you mentioned that you're a non-technical person, but despite that, you managed to install your own node. So I probably know that some people in the audience will be wondering, like, how do you start to learn those things if you're not a developer? Because I think that's one of the main things that people think, right? That if you want to, for example, start using BTC-based servers, and if you don't have the actual knowledge, or you probably want to install your own node, but you don't know where to start. So how do you manage to do those things? What advice can you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, at that time in 2017 and 2018, when I put together my first node on a Raspberry Pi, there was no ChatGPT or LLMs. So I'm really thankful to Stadikus, who is a developer at Bitbox now. At that time, he was just a tinkerer and a developer playing around with Lightning. And he made a really nice guide called the Raspberry Bold Guide, that I just followed to the T. And, first time being in a command line, working with Linux and stuff. So I just followed it. And, when I had questions, I went to, some forums, Googled them and found them, asked my questions and fixed it. Nowadays, everything is a lot easier. There are also good node packages that people can use to run a node. For example, there is the Raspberry Blitz node package, which is basically a descendant of the Raspberry Bold. Actually, all the node packages are descendants of the Raspberry Bold. Raspberry Bold was really the proto node package where you did everything on your own in command line, and then came the scripted things like Raspberry Blitz, and then came MyNode and Umbrel and Start9. So there's plenty of options out there now, and various different teams working on it. And it's and I think there's good documentation for all these projects, and I would recommend to start with one of those. Obviously, use large language models to troubleshoot your problems. That's a big help if you're non-technical, and to learn the first things about command line and things like that. Yeah, I think it's, so I've also switched from Windows to Linux, right? And all those things. Just with more understanding, you drop the bad habits of using convenience products that surveil you, and where you are not in control, but you're not a free user. So I'm trying to use, only open source software, because, it's important that I like my freedom. I like my sovereignty. And that always goes a little bit with the trade-off of convenience. But you're learning so much, and it's very empowering. And it's a good exercise for sure if you want to learn more about Bitcoin and get started to do these things.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And all right, so I want to start talking about adopting Bitcoin and how probably people will be fascinated about how it all started and your experience in El Salvador. But just before that, I'm really curious about, because you mentioned that if I'm not mistaken, you said that the Munich community is one of the oldest, if not the oldest. So do you know the story, how this started, or can you share a bit about that? Because I think it will be a fascinating topic.
Well, I was not there in 2010. But I know the guys who were there. I met them. They're still coming to the Bitcoin meetups. They're generally, open source developers that discovered Bitcoin very early on, and also mined, and just started to meet once a month and talk about Bitcoin. So I don't know too much about the first 5 years. I only joined, first 6 years. I only joined in 2016, and for the first time. But yeah, I think there is like the Berlin meetup. There is one in Berlin, which started a week later, after the Munich meetup, independently. So those two are fighting a little bit, and over the title of which one is the oldest ongoing Bitcoin meetup. So shout out to the to the Berlin Bitcoiners. I mean, it's a week or two or something. I think one started in I think both started in July 2010 or so, way before my time. I heard some stories, people come and go, but some of them are still there and hanging out and are on Telegram on the Bitcoin Munich chat. So, yeah.
I'll probably contact them because I think it will be a fascinating story to know how their inceptions, because they were super early. So there were a few communities back then.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of the discussions were happening on Bitcoin Talk at that time, right? So anybody who was interested in it went to Bitcoin Talk. There was no Twitter, there was no Reddit, and there was probably also a place in those forums where you could post, regional meetups, and I suppose that's how they started. But yeah, I'm not the right person to ask that.
Yeah, all right. So you have visited El Salvador, so can you share a bit about your story? When was the first time that you went there? It was all about Bitcoin, or how was your story?
Yeah, my first time in El Salvador was in November 2021, and I only was there for 6 days for the conference. I had to fly back really quickly because I had to be back in Istanbul for the birth of my daughter, my second child. So it was already very adventurous for me to, leave my wife, highly pregnant, to go to El Salvador. But everything went well. The conference went well. And also I was back in time for the birth of my daughter. So the first time around, I didn't. Thank you. She's turning 3 years in a month. Yeah. So the first time I didn't really manage to spend a lot of time there. But last November, I was there actually with my family for 6 weeks, and my mother. So my wife, my 2 kids, my mother, and friends also from Turkey that came to the conference and stayed in El Salvador. Yeah, we stayed in San Salvador. We traveled across the country. We went to Santa Ana and participated.
Oh, that's cool. My family's from Santa Ana.
Yeah. That was really cool. Yeah. We went to the Bitcoin meetup there. Shout out to Iats and Lawrence and all those guys. And then, checked out the Ruta de las Flores a little bit, Coatepeque, and, just
the lake,
traveling around.
I think.
Yes, the lake. Yes, the lake, the volcano lake. Yeah. And I think it's the Santa Elena volcano, right?
Santa Ana
volcano, yeah. Exactly. And from there, then we went to Berlin and visited the nascent Bitcoin circular economy in Usulután, Berlin, on the top of the mountains there. Saw the Bitcoin Center, stayed there for a couple of nights, and paid with Bitcoin. And then we went, my mother left and we went to El Zonte, where we stayed at a nice surfing resort for 4 weeks. My son learned swimming there in the pool. My wife was surfing and I was working in the garden. And it was really cool to just live on Bitcoin. I traveled around a little bit, but just spent some time in El Zonte, meeting people there, eating pupusas, going to the restaurants.
So you actually showed your mother,
market.
Because you told me that your mom asked you about way before that. How can you spend?
Oh my God, my mom. Every time we were in a restaurant or in a supermarket or anywhere there was something to pay, my mom was ready with her phone and wanting to pay. It was
really.
She was paying everything. Yeah.
So you were on Spielen by then. Fill her.
I mean, I mean, she loved it. Like, she loved the weather. She loved the food. She loved that she could pay with Bitcoin. She saw it with her own eyes, and it, and she is a Bitcoiner, Bitcoin believer. I mean, she's not very technical, but she gets it now, and she doesn't discard it as a joke anymore or some fancy science project of, she takes it seriously, and she bought sizable amount of Bitcoin after she went to El Salvador as well, because it certainly impressed her what she saw.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think in the end, that's one of the best ways, I think, to understand Bitcoin. Not the, as you mentioned, the technical part, or it's like the internet. We don't know the protocol, like the HTTP or the TCP/IP. We don't know. We just use it. I mean, there's not even a company, so we just use the internet, right? So in the end, I think that will be the goal in Bitcoin, to use it without knowing the technical part. And I think that that's one of the best advantage, I think, to go to El Salvador and experience, not just to visit the country, but to actually see the Bitcoin circular economy in the places that we're building it little by little. I want to ask you about the Adopting Bitcoin conference. So how do you start there? I don't know if you know, what was the original goal of the event and how eventually scale to what it is today. Cuando dejas tus activos digitales en un exchange o en custodia de alguien más, te expones a riesgos de terceros no deseados. A diferencia del sistema bancario tradicional, Bitcoin te permite tomar el control total de tus fondos utilizando tus propias claves privadas. Esto te permite ser soberano y esencialmente tu propio banco. Al tomar el control de tus Bitcoin, puedes evitar riesgos innecesarios de terceros. Almacenar tus Bitcoin en custodia de terceros como los exchanges puede exponerte a ataques de actores malintencionados, gobiernos o estafadores que lo único que quieren es apoderarse de tu dinero. El proceso de autocustodia puede parecer abrumador al principio, pero afortunadamente Blockstream Jade Wallet hace que sea súper fácil custodiar tus activos. Las billeteras de hardware son dispositivos que almacenan de forma segura las claves privadas de tus bitcoins y activos de Liquid sin conexión a internet. Las billeteras de hardware aumentan la seguridad de tu billetera porque tus claves privadas se almacenan en un dispositivo especializado que no está siempre conectado al internet. Como te he dicho antes, mantener tus claves almacenadas en un dispositivo en línea puede exponerte a factores adicionales de ataque, por lo que se recomienda usar una billetera de hardware al almacenar grandes cantidades de Bitcoin durante largos periodos de tiempo. Jade es una billetera de hardware no custodial para Bitcoins y Liquid que ofrece opciones de firma simple y firmas múltiples. Yo personalmente lo utilizo para almacenar mis Bitcoins, ya que me siento mucho más seguro manteniendo mis Bitcoins en una billetera fría que en una almacenada, por ejemplo, en mi teléfono. Si estás pensando en adquirir uno para ti, no olvides utilizar el código de descuento de nuestro show, BitCornerPodcast. De esta forma estarás apoyando directamente el show y además obtendrás un 10% de descuento para la compra de tu billetera fría. BitCorner Podcast es posible gracias a la ayuda de nuestros partners, así que hablemos de Adopting Bitcoin. Los próximos 15 y 16 de noviembre se celebrará la cuarta edición de Adopting Bitcoin en El Salvador. 2 días llenos de presentaciones, paneles, networking, además del mejor café del mundo. Usa el código HODLSV para obtener un 10% de descuento y experimenta la economía circular de Bitcoin visitando las mejores playas y montañas y probando las mejores pupusas en San Salvador.
Yeah, so the background of why I'm organizing Adopting Bitcoin is actually the Bitcoin Beach wallet, which was used in Bitcoin Beach in El Zonte. It was developed and operated by Galloy, or is still operated by Galloy. Now its name is different. It's Blink now.
Blink.
And yeah, after, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin, there was a lot of excitement around it, and Galloy started to hire marketing as well. So they were the first company on the ground in El Salvador, the first Bitcoin company in El Salvador, operating there, specifically in El Salvador. And it was also for Galloy a surprise that, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. At that time, it was maybe expected that a sovereign nation would add Bitcoin to their balance sheet or something like that, to their treasury, but not necessarily as legal tender. But
Yeah,
so
because they
when
were,
that,
sorry to interrupt, for context, is like they were in El Salvador way before it was legal tender, right?
yeah, exactly. So it was the first Bitcoin company in El Salvador, and obviously when the situation came around that this is happening now, I mean, all the Bitcoiners wanted to be a success, right? So there were some Bitcoiners like Nicola Berti, the CEO of Galloy, Moritz Wittersheim from Spectre, Aaron Van Werdum from Bitcoin Magazine. They all traveled to El Salvador, and they were, going around talking to company CEOs and bank directors and managers, and like, what do you know about Bitcoin? Like, how ready are you for this Bitcoin law, which at that time was telling them, that they have to accept Bitcoin, right? So that it was mandatory. And, we didn't know really, nobody has ever done this before, like, and a whole country adopting Bitcoin. Like you had maybe a bar or a restaurant accepting Bitcoin payments, but suddenly a whole country was supposed to accept Bitcoin payments. Like, that was a big challenge. Like, how do you do this? Nobody has ever done this. And so the guys at that time said, okay, well, there's a huge need for education. And yeah, like, what can we do? Like, how can we educate people? Like, we need a Bitcoin conference here, was the conclusion. And that's how it started, basically. That's why Adopting Bitcoin started. Yeah, just to, to bring Bitcoiners from all over the place, the best and the brightest, to El Salvador. And so that, local Salvadorans, bankers, businesses can come and have a place to learn about this technology from reliable sources. But also for, the Bitcoin community to learn from this big experiment of Bitcoin adoption on such a broad scale. Like, so there's a lot of things to learn for the Bitcoin community and the developers as well from this. And so a conference was really a no-brainer to have. And there were a couple of challenges at that time. Obviously, El Salvador had a security issue at that time, still in 2021. It wasn't exactly, like the number one vacation destination known in the world, but more known as, the murder capital of the world. So there was some hesitancy to be expected there. Also, the COVID pandemic was making traveling really difficult at that time, and was a logistic challenge as well, with all the PCR tests and vaccination requirements. And, Bitcoiners are not really big fans of masks and vaccinations and stuff. But, somehow we managed everything, and there were 700 Bitcoiners from all over the world that came to San Salvador. We made the first conference at the Sheraton Presidente in San Benito in San Salvador. And yeah, it was great, like really great attendance. Was very thrilling to see all this come together. Bitcoiners follow the call of Bitcoin country of El Salvador and travel to this place despite all these challenges. And it turned out really beautifully. We had a great conference, and some folks stayed a little bit longer to, discover the country, explore it, get to know the people, also outside of, the designated Bitcoin areas like El Zonte. And it was such a great experience for everybody that came, that it was clear for the attendance that there would be another Adopting Bitcoin in 2022, because we had no plans to make this an annual event. Like, we're software developers. We're not conference organizers or event organizers. We were just, the only people on the ground which had like the logistical capabilities of putting on a conference like this, because we were already operating in El Salvador. Yeah. that's why we did it. But, after we saw the feedback, we said, okay, we have to do it again. So we did it again in 22. After 22, the people still loved it. It was still more people coming, over 1,000, more Salvadorans coming. We had some Spanish talks as well. And, and we did it again in 23. And after 23, it was still like people didn't have enough. Still Bitcoin country is, growing slowly, chugging along. More and more people learning about it, more Salvadorans getting involved, Salvadoran companies popping up, being innovative, trying out new things. And now we have a second Bitcoin circular economy. Yeah, I mean, it's not like you say, okay, now everybody accept Bitcoin. That's also what a lot of people expected. Then there was a lot of people making fun of El Salvador when we were in a bear market and all these things. And now, we're getting close to completing a full cycle in El Salvador. And anybody who has touched Bitcoin will have benefited from it. And those people will be further along the journey, and they will have a better understanding, and they know it's not a scam, and it's better money that is not controlled by the government, which is, I think, a big thing that a lot of Salvadorans associated with the government, right? But
misconception about that,
yeah, it's a big misconception, unfortunately. Little by little, there are educational initiatives like Mi Primer Bitcoin, Kubo Plus, Toragos Dev, also Node Nation, Plan B Network, many initiatives. And, it's great to see how there is a vibrant community in El Salvador. I'm learning about new projects every day, and I should know actually, but it's almost impossible to stay up to date and know about all of them. So I'm learning about new projects that are using Bitcoin in some way, whether it's coffee farmers or teachers or dentists, or it's really, really great to see. And not everybody uses it, but the people that use it and when it works, they add it to their arsenal of instruments that they have at their disposal. And even though, you go to a place and they're a little bit hesitant to accept Bitcoin payments, in the end, it works somehow. Many people have Chivo at least. And more and more people are also learning about self-custody. So it's still an exciting journey. I'm curious to see, and I consider myself very fortunate to be so close to this development and observe it and also take part in it with the Adopting Bitcoin conference. Yeah, it was really also great to see how many Salvadoran companies are exhibiting. We have this expo area at Adopting Bitcoin and last year it was almost 90% Salvadoran Bitcoin companies that were exhibiting there. And the amount of the share of Salvadoran attendees is also growing. In the first year there were very few, but in the second year there were already 100 or 200. In the third year, every third attendee was a Salvadoran. And we're hoping that we will have even more. We're obviously also, incentivizing Salvadorans to come with cheaper ticket prices. So it's only $21 for Salvadorans to attend the conference. And there are more and more people curious about it, is my impression. And that's just great to see. It's constantly growing, not crazy exponentially, but those people that come to Bitcoin, they stay, and they are rewarded as time progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get you, because it's super it's a big challenge. Even El Salvador is a small country. It's a big challenge to pivot to a new system, right? Especially when your whole life has been using the fiat system. So it's basically changed your belief system and understand that actually how money actually works, because that's one thing, right, that most of Bitcoiners talk about, that we never knew what actually money is until we start studying Bitcoin. So, and that's when you come the rabbit hole. And one dimension actually is one of the main topics that I think every single episode, if not most of them I talk in the podcast, is that, I think it's one of the main challenge to change the misconception about that Bitcoin is related to Bukele's government. It's not. But yeah, and I also, but you know, I always say this because for me, it's like, it's good and bad. It has pros and cons that people think about it, because for me, a pro is that people don't trust in government money, like CBDCs, for example. So it will be good to know that, all right, it is actually government money. I'm skeptical about that. That's a pro. But the con is the same thing, right? Like, it's not it's not government money, so you need to understand what Bitcoin is all about. But that's why there's all these good efforts in El Salvador, as you mentioned, No Nation, Mi Primer Bitcoin, etc., etc. So yeah, and I want to share with you that last year was actually my dad's first years in adopting Bitcoin. My dad is Bitcoiner as well. Yeah, he attended. I got him a ticket, and at first he was like, but we all understand, because my dad understand English, but just a bit, enough to communicate, to say hello and exchange a short conversation, but not deeper. And I told him, yeah, go ahead. And there will be people talking in Spanish. And he also told me that even the ones that were in English, they had like these headphones that you can do, and it was like live translation, right? So
yeah,
he was very impressed about that. So
that's great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. He loved it. And I think this year he will go again. Hopefully this year he will take my mom. My mom is in the work.
Awesome. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really cool that more Salvadorans come. But adopting Bitcoin, like there are 7 million Salvadorans in El Salvador, and adopting Bitcoin is never going to manage to educate 7 million people, right?
Of course.
So it's always a little bit more of a technical, like even if there are non-technical talks as well, it's always a little bit more technical than, what general audiences are used to. So it attracts a certain audience of people with initiative and curiosity, educators, builders, developers, investors as well, because Bitcoin country, El Salvador is Bitcoin country, and it's the epicenter of also something that was kicked off not just in El Salvador, but in other places. Like a lot of people came to adopting Bitcoin to El Salvador to see how Bitcoin Beach did it, to start this, right? President Nayib Bukele was inspired by Bitcoin Beach and their work that they did for many years. And he saw that, barely literate Salvadorans can use Bitcoin and it works for them, then it can also work for the other 7 million if those people can do it, and a lot of people are moving to El Salvador now because it's this beacon for freedom and sovereignty and Bitcoin, but also a lot of people want to replicate what is happening in El Salvador and in Bitcoin Beach in their own communities. So they're coming from all over the world to El Salvador every year to exchange, to see, to feel, to update themselves on how to do this, which technologies to use, which educational approaches to use, which materials there are, and what works and what not. So they don't repeat, the same mistakes, because mistakes are being made if you do something for the very first time, and it takes some time until you figure out how it works. And it's a lot more efficient if you share this trial and error research results with others. So they don't have to, make every mistake themselves and, can just move on. Obviously, it's not a one size fits all. Every place is different. Every place has different requirements, different composition of people, different problems. But there are a couple of things that work universally. And like it's also El Salvador that inspired the world and many Bitcoiners around the world to just go ahead and do it in their own community, to just go ahead and use Bitcoin as money and stop using inflationary fiat money that slowly debases over time and steals your time, basically, right? That, it just works. And it's a matter of getting more people onto this alternative network. And like I said in the beginning, like the more people get onto it, the more useful Bitcoin becomes for every user. And those that use it once hardly ever, stop using it. So it's only going into one direction. And so number of people is going up constantly. And Bitcoin is getting better for everybody for that reason. And it's just a matter of time. And I think another thing that I would like to mention is that adopting Bitcoin is also this place, where people with initiative come to. Bitcoin is not managed by Nayib Bukele or Max Kaiser or Samson Mao or anybody. It's a decentralized network, and that means that it is managed by the users. And everybody who uses Bitcoin is a user, and it's only through the contributions of every Bitcoiner that this whole thing actually works. So a lot of people, learn about Bitcoin, they buy some, their purchasing power appreciates, they learn a little bit more about best practices. They watch videos, listen to podcasts, read books and blogs, and go to a conference and listen. But there comes a time for most, if they've done this for long enough, where they want to give back and contribute back. Yeah, I think adopting Bitcoin is also the place where, a lot of people, they come to the conference and they listen and they see and check out what's going on. And then they want to participate and give back and contribute back with whatever they are doing. And I love to see it. I love to see this initiative of people I come from Germany. I was born and raised in Germany, and, there is this German word that I hate. It's called verboten, which means it's forbidden. So it's really paralyzing people and paralyzing entrepreneurship, because everybody thinks, oh, I want to do something nobody has ever done before. It's probably verboten. It's probably not allowed for me to do this. And this is not the right way to think about things, right? It's way better, to just go ahead and do things and, and see what happens. And, as long as you don't hurt anybody else and you add value to society, you're most probably good, and people will appreciate what you're doing. I think it is something that I've discovered among Bitcoiners, this entrepreneurship and this initiative to do things, to go out and do things, that I appreciate a lot.
Hey everyone, it's Bitcoin Junior Club here. Not sure if you've already heard, but this year, Adopting Bitcoin El Salvador is running an extra family-friendly space. Education and fun all in one place. I'm really excited to co-organize this part of the program with them. It's called Bitcoin para Niños. The space is free for all adopting Bitcoin ticket holders. And hey, kids under 18 don't need entry tickets anyway. So why not to bring the young members of your family along? Mark your calendars. November 15 and 16, San Salvador. It's going to be great. So see you at Bitcoin para Niños.
It's really funny that, when we discussed about El Salvador with friends or people here on the podcast or even in the meetups, that I always talk about how Bitcoin changed the meaning of developing for El Salvador and any country that is a developing country, because for me it's really funny that the global south is categorized like developing countries, but they remains developing country forever. So because the fiat system, the laws are made to never change the game, right? You cannot win the game with their own rules, so you need to change the rules or fight with another rules. And for me, I perceive that El Salvador, it's finally categorized as an actual developing country, because you can see that it's actually developing things. It already had developed some things in this small period of time, and we are just beginning. And I mean, it probably represents like 1% or 2% of we want to accomplish, but it's a lot if you compare for the past 50 years that we have in El Salvador. And so I actually see that it's actually developing to in the future become a developed country. And I'm not saying that we're going to be rich, but that we're actually going to have the opportunity to change the future of the country, right? And we have seen that, and it's really interesting because we have seen that also in the Bitcoin Beach in El Zonte. So as you mentioned, Bukele was inspired of that. And one thing that I want to ask you is that since you work with Galoy, I don't know if you can share a bit about how was back then the support for the Bitcoin Beach, El Zonte back then. I mean, how is the story, the relationship between Galoy and the inceptions or the continuation of these past years with El Zonte and then to the whole country?
Oh, before I answer that, just a quick comment on what you said. I think this idea of first world and third world, or developed nations and developing nations, is a little bit, out of date. I look at it more, like there are places that are improving their situation. They're getting better and better and better. And maybe they have started from a not so great place. And El Salvador is a great example for that. But they're improving their situation and they're ascending, right? They're going up. Everything is slowly but surely getting better. And there are places, like a lot of countries in Europe and parts of the United States where they've been on top, and sure, there's like things changing, but not necessarily for the better. And they are descending countries. Like, the quality of architecture is declining. The quality of services is declining. Prices are going up. And, there is a lot of things changing in the world right now. And I think it's really important that you are not, that you're just constantly improving and working, and hardworking people will be rewarded, especially if they're on a Bitcoin standard. That much is clear, because they're not being stolen from, and that will just give them a positive outlook on the future, because they will realize that this is a just and fair system and game that they can play forever. The fiat game is not like that. It is a parasitic game where you're being debased and stolen from, and you lose your morals, because why should you have morals? Everybody is already stealing from you. Like, why shouldn't you steal a little bit as well, right? Like, this is where the morals of a society go to shit. It's through inflation. And I'm really excited about the path that El Salvador has chosen under Nayib Bukele, and obviously inspired by Bitcoin Beach. Now, about the relationship of Galoy and Bitcoin Beach, I think the way it started, and I wasn't there when this started, right? I joined Galoy in 2021 after Nayib Bukele announced that El Salvador is going to adopt Bitcoin. in Miami. But before, like, I think it's in August 2021. That's when I joined. But it started already in 2019, 2020, when Nicola Berti wanted to develop a Lightning wallet. And the way he understood Lightning, he saw the limitations, and, you know, he wanted to have a wallet and develop a wallet based on market needs, based on demand, where he could iterate based on feedback. And so it needed to be a place where people, you know, used Bitcoin a lot, and not just, you know, once a month when they go to their meetup, where they have, you know, a bar that they have convinced. No, it had to be like constant usage, high volume usage, and a lot of feedback. And because that's his preferred development approach, based on developing based on feedback, according to the needs of the people. And he heard about Mike Peterson and Hope House and Bitcoin Beach on a podcast, and they reached out and said, "Hey, we heard that you want to use like Bitcoin as money, and we're looking to develop a wallet that just does just that, and, you know, without the need to run a node and become a technical expert and manage liquidity and stuff like that. A wallet that just works and that can be used by people that are barely literate." And so he traveled to El Zonte and lived there for a while and developed the wallet, like watching people use it in El Zonte in the streets, interviewing them, asking them questions, what to make better, and iterating based on that market feedback. And yeah, that's how it started.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, because I know that back then it was called the Bitcoin Beach wallet, right? Now it's Blink. So
yeah, a lot of other communities wanted to use the same wallet. You know, in Costa Rica, in Guatemala, in Brazil, in Africa also. So people started to download the Bitcoin Beach wallet. But Bitcoin Beach wallet is a very long name, and it's also like people thought, okay, maybe I can't use it if I'm not from Bitcoin Beach or so. We just renamed it to a shorter name and added some languages and currencies, because there are many people that want to use it to, you know, get to a point where, you know, they have the necessary network effect in their community. And in order to have that, you know, you have to have a solution that works for normal people as well. And Blink turned out to be very suitable for it, and covering a lot of points.
Yeah, absolutely. Because actually, when I discovered it and I wanted to use it for the first time, it was called Bitcoin Beach wallet. But that's one of the first things that I was asking, like, can I use it? It is possible for me to use it, but yeah. So it's a good point that you made, and thank God you switched the name, because I think now people, they will just use it, and I think it's easier to find. Even I think it's worked better with the SEO and all those things that in the internet. Yeah. So, I forgot to mention, we're gonna wrap it up, but before that, I forgot to mention I have this little game on the podcast that I just started a couple episodes ago. So is that the previous guest normally know, or probably they don't know, who's my next guest. So in your case, my previous guest knew that it was you who came to the podcast. So he has a specific question for you. And so the game is that I'm going to ask you and you reply, and you have the opportunity also to make a next question for my next guest that I also know who it is. So I'm going to tell you who it is.
Okay.
All right. So
let's go.
So this question is from Mawufemor Kofi Folivi, and he's from Bitcoin Dua, from Africa actually. And so his question is,
in dealing with Bitcoin, what would be the most height of the impact that he would like to see Bitcoin do in his own community?
Biggest impact, I would like to have on my own community.
You can take some time. I think it's quite deep, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at all the religions, right, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, but also Buddhism, Hinduism, and everything that came before, right, there is a couple of things that they all have in common, and they're very basic building blocks of a society. And one of them is, like, don't murder, right? Don't steal. Don't steal. Like, property rights are something I have observed with my children. Like, I didn't teach them property rights. They take this and say, this is mine. and they protect it. They protect it. They hate it when you take it away from them.
So my nephew as well.
It's not it's a natural thing, that humans have. We like property rights. And if you have strong property rights, then, people take care of their property. They treat it well, they maintain it well, and things improve. Now, if you have weak property rights, things really deteriorate. Nobody feels responsible. Nobody has ownership. Everything is somebody else's problem, and things don't get maintained. And on top of that, if spend time working for money, your time is scarce, and then you get money, but that money is devaluing. This is equivalent to somebody stealing your time, your lifetime, time that you could have spent with your family, your loved ones, your kids. And whether people rebel against this now as much as as they should or not, they feel it. They feel that something is not right. They lose their belief in being a good person, that it's worth it, that it's worth being a righteous, good person that just is without stealing, without being a criminal, without lying, without cheating. They believe when everybody is constantly being stolen from, like, the morals go out, like a society really loses their morals. And I hope that I can observe this lack and this loss of morals, this deterioration of morals in high inflation societies here in Turkey. And I hope that, here people will discover Bitcoin and they will rediscover that it is actually worth it to be a righteous person and to be a moral person and to be a good person. You don't have to cheat and steal and defraud in order to get to a good place in this world. But just by hard work, you can make it by saving, because you can save your money in Bitcoin that cannot be debased, that is difficult to steal from you, and gives you strong property rights that belong to you. And that's basically the whole thing that I think is the impact of hard and sound money on a society. I think it has many positive implications on almost everything, I would argue, throughout. If we have a sound money system, it will affect, all the humans that use it in a positive way, restoring their faith in being a righteous and good person. And that will just make my life also better because I'm surrounded by righteous and good people. And that's the society I want to be in.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. This is all you mentioned in the end are like symptoms of the fiat system, right? I think that's why. I think that's why cycles happen in terms of the fallen empires, right? That's why all the previous empires fall in the end. They never had like a really sound proper money, or I think it's really interesting the times we're living, because now we had actually the the proper tool to change and to do a society like this. So yeah, I agree with you. So Kemal, so let's start wrap it up, and I don't know, anything that you want to add that I haven't asked to you? This is the time, and in summary, what can people expect on Adopting Bitcoin 2024?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, Juan.
It's a pleasure.
Really appreciate the opportunity to speak about adopting Bitcoin. I don't know. I mean, it's always difficult, to say what can people expect. I don't know what they can expect. I mean, it's something that will happen in the future. And, we just bring a couple of really, really cool people together that confirmed that they will be coming. And usually when we do that, past performance is not an indicator for future, but usually when we do that, when you bring a bunch of really cool, dedicated, passionate Bitcoiners to Bitcoin country, then really nice things happen. And we have a lot of very talented people. We had them in the past. We're having them back this year. New ones as well. We have over 130, 140 speakers from, I think, more than 30 or 40 countries. There is going to be a lot of things to learn, to hear, to a lot of amazing people to network with. And just a great get together that will probably yield again new connections that will go on to do amazing things in the future. This is what has happened in the past. A lot of great projects started at Adopting Bitcoin, were announced at Adopting Bitcoin. For example, Fediment was first announced. Burak came to Adopting Bitcoin and first talked about ARC. Mi Primer Bitcoin was first announced and introduced at Adopting Bitcoin in 22. Yeah, so there's going to be new things, also new developments from El Salvador that are also Bitcoin and Nostr related. And there is exciting things that I am looking forward to share soon. So we're currently in the progress of finalizing the schedule, and we hope to publish it in a week or two. And it's going to be packed. It's going to be multiple stages in a new venue that we're going to. It's called Salamanca in the south of San Salvador. It's a first time that we're doing it not in a hotel, but in a proper event venue. And I'm looking forward to it. I hope there will be more Salvadorans again coming. We will have translations again, and we will have $21 tickets for Salvadoran attendees. And there will be a lot of satellite events around the event. For all the information, your listeners can go to adoptingbitcoin.org and then click on El Salvador. There is all the speakers and all the satellite events listed there. If you want to follow Adopting Bitcoin and the updates, there's also Twitter, Adopting BTC, where we regularly share updates. My Twitter handle is prettyflaco. It's _PRETYFLACO. And if somebody is curious to check out the Blink wallet, that's blink.sv, where they can learn more about it. And I'm looking forward to coming back to El Salvador. And it's always been a pleasure to be there. And I'm a regular guest. I'm looking forward to the adventures and to a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna add all of that, all the links and the podcast notes so people can find it. Remember, guys, you also can have a discount using the promo code, all in capital letters, so you can go to the event. So you also mentioned that in 2 weeks you will have all packets, so that means that today you will find it. Enjoy El Salvador. Guys, go to Adopting Bitcoin, not just about the conference, but experience the Bitcoin circular economy, try the pupusas. It's drink the coffee, not just the one that Bukele have. Try Cherito Cafe as well, and other ones. I know you're gonna love it. And yeah, just have a great time. It's a beautiful country. And then you go to the beach, the mountain, whatever you want. So that's the beauty of El Salvador. Is small, but you can do multiple things in a short period of time. So yeah, thank you, Kemal, for this episode. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Juan. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
All right, guys. See you next week. Ciao.